The Philippines had opened a Coast Guard post in the country's far north to boost security following China's military buildup near Taiwan over the past 2 years. The outpost shall gather essential maritime data and intelligence, enabling the Philippine Coast Guard to respond effectively to threats such as illicit trade, trafficking, piracy, and foreign intrusions. In 2022, the area around Itbayat witnessed a military buildup as China responded to political developments between Taiwan and the United States, leading Manila announcing the opening of the station on the Philippines' northernmost inhabited island. Securing peace, stability, and freedom of navigation along the Luzon Strait is crucial for ensuring Philippine national security and economic prosperity. The island of Itbayat is located around 150 kilometers or 93 miles of Taiwan's southmost coast. Situated in Luzon Strait, which lies between the Philippines and Taiwan, both a vital international waterway and a potential flashpoint for regional and international conflicts. J. Terriella, the Philippine Coast Guard spokesman for South China Sea issues, said the Itbayat station will enable effective monitoring of vessels passing through the strait. Notably, there have been instances that the People's Republic of China vessels were being observed in this maritime area as they crossed to the Philippines' eastern seaboard. Itbayat is just outside the area designated by a vaguely defined map of dashes that China uses to claim most of the South China Sea. The island was one of the venues of joint military exercises by the Philippines and the U.S. from April 22 to May 10, in which more than 16,000 troops from both sides participated. In 2023, the Philippines almost doubled the number of its military bases that U.S. forces can access, including 3 facing Taiwan. China has said the Philippines' moves for new additional U.S. bases were stoking the fire of regional tensions. In waters east of Taiwan, China conducted mock missile strikes and dispatched bombers carrying live missiles on Friday in its 2-day Taiwan drills. The exercises were launched to punish Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, whom it has denounced as a separatist to China's communist type of government. Taiwan tracked dozens of Chinese warplanes and Navy vessels off its coast on Friday, the second day of a large military exercise launched by Beijing to show its anger over the self-governing island's inauguration of new leaders, who refused to accept its insistence that Taiwan is part of China. China has issued elaborate media statements showing Taiwan being surrounded by forces from its military, the People's Liberation Army. A new video on Friday showed animated Chinese forces approaching from all sides and Taiwan being enclosed within a circular target area while simulated missiles hit key population and military targets. Despite that, there was little sign of concern among Taiwan's 23 million people, who have lived under threat of Chinese invasion since the two sides split during a civil war in 1949. Taiwan's parliament was mired on Friday in a dispute between political parties over procedural measures, and business continued as usual in the bustling capital of Taipei and the ports of Keelung and Kaohsiung. The Defense Ministry said it tracked 49 Chinese warplanes and 19 Navy vessels, as well as Coast Guard vessels, and that 35 of the planes flew across the median line in the Taiwan Strait, the de facto boundary between the two sides, over a 24-hour period from Thursday to Friday. Taiwanese Marine and Coast Guard vessels along with air and ground-based missile units have been put on alert, particularly around the Taiwan-controlled island chains of Kinmen and Matsu just off China's coast and far from Taiwan's main island. Facing external challenges and threats, Taiwan will continue to maintain the values of freedom and democracy, the new president, Lai Ching-te, told sailors and top security officials Thursday, as he visited a marine base in Taoyuan, just south of the capital, Taipei. The Pentagon said the United States was monitoring very closely the joint Chinese drills. It said Beijing's actions are reckless risk escalation and erode long-standing norms that have maintained regional peace and stability for decades. In his inauguration speech on Monday, Lai urged Beijing to stop its military intimidation and said Taiwan was a sovereign independent nation with democratic type of government in which sovereignty lies in the hands of the people. China's military said its expanded exercises around Taiwan were punishment for separatist forces seeking independence. It sends Navy ships and warplanes into the Taiwan Strait and other areas around the island almost daily to wear down Taiwan's defenses and seek to intimidate its people, who firmly back their de facto independence. As soon as the leader of Taiwan took office, he challenged the One China principle and blatantly sold the two-state theory, the spokesperson of China's Taiwan Affairs Office, Chen Binhua, said in a statement Thursday night. The One China principle asserts that there is only one China and that Taiwan is part of China under Communist Party rule. Beijing views Taiwan as a renegade province and has been upping its military threats even as the island's electorate overwhelmingly favors de facto independence. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin, at a daily briefing on Friday, dismissed U.S. calls for China to exercise restraint in relation to the latest drills. The U.S. is in no position to make such irresponsible remarks, according to China. Washington is legally bound to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself and considers all threats to the island a matter of grave concern. The U.S. has been aiding in the upgrading of Taiwan's equipment and training, even while its official policy remains ambiguous on whether American troops and those of regional allies would be dispatched to defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. China's exercises come on the heels of combined drills by U.S. and its Dutch NATO ally in the disputed South China Sea, a crucial waterway for global trade, fisheries and energy resources which China claims virtually in its entirety. China routinely objects to activities in the region by foreign military forces it accuses of acting without mandate outside their home regions. China has particularly pressed its claims against the Philippines. The Philippines Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro on Friday criticized Beijing's increasingly aggressive actions in the South China Sea, without citing China by name. He spoke at a military ceremony marking the anniversary of the founding of the Philippine Navy. The Philippines, he said, would not tolerate aggression and provocative moves. Since territorial hostilities with China surged last year in the South China Sea, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s administration has taken steps to forge new security alliances with a number of Asian and Western countries and allowed a U.S. military presence in more Philippine bases under a 2014 defense pact. The waters off the north coast of the main Philippine island of Luzon were the focus earlier this month of major annual joint military exercises between Manila and its longtime ally the United States. These included using missiles and artillery to repel an imaginary sea-borne invasion force. Last year, the Philippine government also granted the U.S. military use of a Navy base on Luzon's north coast and a nearby airport as part of a defense cooperation agreement. Beijing and Manila are in a bitter diplomatic dispute over rival claims to parts of the South China Sea. China has built artificial islands and military installations in waters close to the Philippines. Itbayat is just outside the area designated by a vaguely defined map of dashes that China uses to claim most of the South China Sea. As tensions continue to escalate between China and the Philippines over disputed territory in the South China Sea, Manila has devised a different plan to counter China. Interestingly, it centers around Beijing's kryptonite, Taiwan. The Philippines is taking full advantage of Batanes group of island as a strategic location to deter China's ambitious expansion into the Pacific, which taking its effort to control Taiwan. To strengthen the country's territorial defense and monitoring system, the Philippine government inaugurated its northernmost Coast Guard station in Batanes. Earlier this year, the Philippines Defense Secretary directed the military to increase the number of troops stationed at the northernmost island, specifically the remote Batanes Island. During the visit to the naval installations, the agency also called for the development of more infrastructure on the island which will be funded by U.S. These include ports that can accommodate large vessels and other facilities to be used during crises, including humanitarian and disaster relief. But here is a catch. The Batanes Islands are located just 200 kilometers or 125 miles from Taiwan, a self-ruled island state that China considers its renegade province and wants to occupy. The announcement made by the Filipino Defense Secretary comes at a time when China and the Philippines have been locking horns in the South China Sea. China has no business warning the Philippines about its activities in Batanes, the country's northernmost island province closest to Taiwan, when Philippine officials ordered to increase military presence in Batanes as they highlighted its strategic importance for the country. After several months of confrontation at sea and bombast by Chinese authorities, the Philippines is looking to bolster its military capability and strengthen its territorial defenses. The decision to boost troops and expand infrastructure at Batanes Islands seems to be a part of that ambitious strategy. The Bashi Channel, which runs between Batanes and Taiwan, is a crucial choke point for ships traveling between the Western Pacific and the disputed South China Sea and is likely to be used by China in case of hostilities. The Philippine Navy opened its naval detachment on Mavulas Island in Batanes in October 2023. In November 2023, the Philippines and the United States started joint patrols on Mavulas Island, located 100 kilometers from Taiwan, and ended in the South China Sea. The United States was also granted access to a tiny island portion of the Philippines in the Cagayan region as part of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA. Located just 250 miles or 400 kilometers south of Taiwan, Fuga Island could potentially be used to harass the southern flank in case of a Chinese naval attack on Taiwan. Additionally, it could be used by the United States for launching operations against China as it lies adjacent to two key passages, the Luzon Strait and the Bashi Channel, which provide access to the South China Sea and the Pacific. Reports have indicated that the U.S. may consider building a civilian port on the Batanes Islands. The Batanes region is a cluster of atolls and islets along the strategic Luzon Strait, a maritime passage and a vital conduit for undersea fiber optic cables. Unfortunately, it's also a crossing point for the Chinese Navy when they hold large-scale drills to intimidate Taiwan. In the event of open hostilities between China and Taiwan, there's no doubt large naval forces will either try to travel or even launch combat operations in and around the Luzon Strait. The Defense Department stresses that Batanes is Philippine territory, and China has no business, warning the Philippines about what it does within its territory. Last year, China also slammed the Philippines' move to allow the United States to rotate and store defense equipment and supplies in 3 of its military bases relatively near Taiwan under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. The bulk of the new bases under the expanded EDCA are located in northernmost Philippine provinces, namely Cagayan and Isabela, which are notably distant from the South China Sea theater. Crucially, the two allies have also expanded joint exercises with a growing focus on the Philippines' northern shores. Philippine authorities maintain that any cooperation with the Pentagon is primarily geared toward economic and civilian purposes. The port in Batanes, for instance, is supposed to enhance connectivity between the relatively isolated province, surrounded by rough seas and regularly battered by monsoons, and the rest of the Philippines. As for facilities in other northern Philippine provinces, authorities insist that any U.S. support or rotational presence will be primarily for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. But those facilities could also be dual use. For instance, EDCA facilities built for potentially housing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations-related hardware such as cargo planes could also, in theory, host fighter jets and more offensive-oriented weapons systems. Beijing will see any U.S. move to build up ports and facilities, overtly military ones or ostensibly civilian ones, in the Indo-Pacific as a hostile act, as they can also be used to support any potential U.S. intervention over a Chinese use of force against Taiwan as hostile. In particular, China fears that the U.S. is trying to build an island chain of dual-purpose facilities around Taiwan to more effectively respond to any potential contingency over the self-ruling island that China views as a renegade province that must eventually be reunified with the mainland. Nevertheless, the trajectory of the Philippine-U.S. defense cooperation in recent months suggests that the Southeast Asian nation is gradually preparing for any armed conflicts, either in its exclusive economic zone or in its neighboring waters. Starting 2024, the operational tempo for the AFP, Armed Forces of the Philippines, will be higher, the Philippine Defense Chief said during his recent visit to the Philippines' northernmost military facility in Batanes, as far as the northern baseline is concerned. The Philippine Navy described the unprecedented visit by the Philippines Defense Chief, who was accompanied by the AFP Chief and Top Admiral, as signifying a pivotal moment in the nation's commitment to territorial defense and national security.